Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
Hey, well, welcome back to the next podcast.
We just keep on rolling.
Keep on trucking. It's great. Todd, how's it going, man?
It's going good.
Excellent. Hey, what, just catch people up. Like, what's been going on in your world here lately, man?
Oh, well, things are going. Holiday season is in gear right now. And so.
Are you a Thanksgiving guy or a Christmas guy?
Oh, man. They're different to me. Like,
okay.
Thanksgiving is. Typically we stay here and we get to do some of the, like fun things like flag football. I do a game with that. And then, the food's great and and it's spent with more like church friends or just friends in general, where Christmas is more, I'm going to go see my family. Yeah. And so it's just more traveling at Christmas, all those kind of things. No. So.
Yeah, we lucked out. Thanksgiving's always my favorite holiday, but hands down, family, football, and food, and kind of in those categories. All right, sometimes more food than family. No, I'm just kidding. But at Christmas, I mean, my family is here, and Rachel's family's here, except for her brother, who's in San Antonio, soaking up the sunshine while we're shivering. Random question. I was just thinking about that the other day. I'm like, all right, it's coming. It's around the corner. It's in our face.
It is. So. I like them both for different reasons. Yeah. So
very cool. Well, hey, we wanted to dive into just something a little bit different. Just kind of talking about leadership and just different styles of leadership and things that, you've grown in leadership over the years, and I've grown in leadership. At least I hope so.
Like they say, if you're not growing, you're dying, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yep. Healthy things grow. And I would say that coming out of college, leadership was something that was kind of floated, but I mean, we really focused just on being a pastor. And I look back and I've had conversations with a lot of guys like, man, I wish we would have talked about this a little bit more. And I think sometimes leadership was one of those things, because as soon as I got out of college, like Maxwell had been doing books, but man, then you get into the work environment and you're like, hey, let's talk about leadership. And you aren't prepared to lead in this way, or aren't prepared, I'll just start off. Like, we went to Oregon right after I got out of college, and it was our first job, and I was youth pastor, and I wasn't prepared to lead junior high girls in my first job. Like
no one is.
But like we were thrown into the fire with this group of girls that were awesome. And I look back and I can still, just remember those days of, man, I wasn't prepared to like be here, but God was so gracious. And between the girls in that youth group and the guys in that youth group, was just a great thing. But man, leadership wise, I felt like I was swimming in the deep end really, really quick. And I don't know if you felt like that coming here.
Yes, I did. I think you described it very well. And I just have never put like that much those words to it. It's like, yeah, I felt like school was kind of like, okay, I've got a good theological basis to go from. Like, I know like what a pastor should know, what a pastor should do with like just his work. But the hard part, and I don't describe, like the leadership component is like, okay, so then how do you lead people? Yeah. And I mean, I remember I had all these plans. Here's what we're going to go through. We're going to do this. Week 2 in, I scrapped it all and was like, that's not going to work. It's not going to work at all.
Yeah, we definitely have an idea about it. I mean, like, it's kind of like that old adage, right? Everybody knows what they want to do until they get punched in the face.
Right. And that's exactly what it felt like. And I know for me, it was like, I remember hitting kind of year 2 and being kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to lead this. I don't know what to do. I just felt like stuck. Mm-hmm. Like I was doing things, but it just is like, I feel lost. I don't know where to take them. I don't know.
As you look back, do you, is there a word, like it's not a trick question because I have an answer because I've been thinking about this for a couple of minutes, but like, is there a word that is what you tried to do in those first few years or that first year? Is there a word that said, I tried to do this in ministry, or I tried to be this? Do you want me to go first so I can give you a second to think, or you have an idea?
You can go ahead. I have a word. I just don't know, like, or a phrase.
Yeah, I think for me, when I got into ministry and I realized something quick, I was like, it goes back to those old things. Kids don't care, that you tell them you care. They want to know that you care, and they don't know how much, and I wanted to be present. Like, I realized really quick that if I wasn't present in the lives of these kids, like their games, their things that were going on, or even spending time with some of those leaders that I had, that I wasn't gonna make the impact that I really felt like God had placed us there for that time. And so I really worked hard at being present in the midst of their lives. And man, we had a blast. We had a lot of fun. And that I still look back at that moment fondly, going, man, had I not been present, and maybe I was more present, thankfully I had 6 months without Rachel there while she was finishing college, and I was there, and that kind of helped set the tone. But she and I really wanted to continue that idea, that mantra, being present for those kids and letting them know that we were for them and we really loved them. So
I think it sounds weird, but I think like the first few years felt like just accomplish it. Like,
okay.
Get the Wednesday night done.
Yep.
Like, be there, do that. But I feel like after that, it was like, okay, direction.
Yeah.
Where am I taking them?
Yeah.
And so the first 2 years is just, okay, just get it done. This is what you were taught to do. So accomplish a Wednesday night, because we had youth group on Wednesday night. So accomplish that night. And then, all right, I probably should like get to know them and go to things. Okay, so get that done. And so it just felt very checklist kind of deal.
Fair enough. And I think you need to have those as leader, right? Yeah.
And it was a good place to start, because I was like, okay. But then it became, all right, the checklist is not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, where, and so now the connection point, all those things, like, where do I want to take them and having purpose behind it, so that the direction was like, we're taking them there.
Yeah.
I remember doing a sermon series on this. Andy Stanley wrote about this, but it's just like, direction is the most important thing, not just like it gets you to your direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not intention. Like, you can have good intentions
all day long,
but direction is what will get you there.
Yeah. And there's intentionality behind that. And I think that, that comes, you've had the opportunity to be here at Fountain Springs like your whole time. And so I've been, I was early on, I was a lot of places. We were far from home. I had a couple of churches where there were circumstances that it just didn't work for me to be there. And then the last 2 times I've, and so, I mean, I've known you for, almost 16 years now,
close to
16 years from the time that you started here, and just being able to watch that. And just, we both have grown as leaders. You have to grow. And we joked about it, right? But, just this mentality of growing as a leader and the necessity of learning those things that you need to learn, or because sometimes you learn them and you're like, oh man, I don't know if I learned that well. I wasn't ready to learn that, or the hardest one, I should have been ready to learn that, or I should have already known that right now, and those ways in which leadership will challenge us and kick us in the face sometimes, but sometimes we need that. So
I think there's multiple things that kind of come to leadership, but I know you and I both have discussed like some really good books that have kind of helped us. Like The Tale of Three Kings is a great book of kind of looking through leadership by King Saul and leadership by King David, and then also like, what kind of leader are you?
Yeah.
That's the Three Kings. And so that book is super helpful to be like, man, there's King Saul was a guy who started off well.
Yeah.
Had it going
chosen
right.
by God.
Chosen by God. He kind of had the looks, had the family background, had all those things going in his favor. And where he got off was just, he wanted to control it, wanted to do it. He had the pressure of, man, all these people are asking for this, needing this to happen. And so instead of waiting for God's timing, he tried to put it on his own. And that just started to derail. And you just see it. He doesn't try to forgive or heal from it. He just keeps going down this road of becoming even more jealous, trying to control his kingdom and all those things. And it just led to his own demise.
Well, and I think that is the dangerous part anytime in leadership. And so many people know this already, but you can't control everything. There's just nobody's that good. And the more you try to control, the more you take on things that you were never intended to be in control of as a leader. Leadership is not about tight-fistedness. It's not about like, I'm going to direct everything. You just, man, and you see that with Saul, that reality of like, the more he tried to control, the more he tried to direct and do his own, you lose sight of God in your way. Those clash and those.
Yeah, when you try to force something to happen, typically messing with God's kind of way he wants it to happen.
Yeah.
And so it can happen, but there's more pain and like hurts that unintentional.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more cloud as opposed to like, this is where we're going. This is the vision we have, and letting God lead those hearts there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard. It's patience. It's humbling. It's all those things.
It is humbling, and nobody wants to be humbled as a leader. And that's, but
and it's scary when it's all like, when it's on you to kind of bring some of that. I just remember that's where I think I felt like 2 years in as a youth pastor being like, I don't know where to take these kids.
Yeah.
And the weight of that. And I was just so thankful that I had a leader at the time who just like, hey, all right, let's go look at some other youth groups and other, youth pastors and see what they're doing. And that just opened my eyes to be like, okay, this is where I want to take them. This is I now have a vision for this, and where I didn't. And it talks about wherever there isn't vision, people. And so, and that's the part I needed at that time. But then after I had that vision, it became like, now I wanted to control it. I wanted to know, I know where this needs to go, and I'm going to make it happen. And so I remember having to have leaders come to me and go, hey, you're doing too much.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I gave it to you, I don't know. And that was a learning curve. That it wasn't a healthy part of me, that's for sure.
The look on their face, and you're like, if you would have said that out loud, like,
man,
listen,
I would have lost a lot of leaders. I would have said that right now. Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about, like, even at all the stops I had, like, there were always leaders where God just gave, like you just talked about, like leaders like, hey, that loved you enough, that wanted you to succeed, that wanted you to take those next steps of going, man, Todd, you can't do that. And I think that's a beautiful thing about, leadership is who you surround yourselves with. And we talk about that a lot, like important people that can look you in the eye and be like, what are you doing? Why are you going that direction? Or help me understand why you made that decision. But as leaders, on the flip side of that, and not every leader's there, and there have been times where I haven't been there, where you say what you said, like, I don't know if I trust what you're saying. I believe what you're saying, and you have to weigh those realities. Yeah,
leadership is not this like, hey, you just make these decisions and it works out. Like each situation, you've got to go, okay, where does God want us to go in this? Yeah. Because decision you made 10 years ago doesn't mean it's going to be the same decision now.
No
like,
way.
You're right. Like, okay, I need to listen to that volunteer and I need to change some of that. But later on, you're going, no, that volunteer's not in the right place. Yeah. But I've had to learn this, like as a leader, learning to take criticism in a healthy way, regardless if it's coming from a healthy source or not.
Yeah.
God may be, he could speak through anybody. I mean, you see it throughout the Bible. There's even a point he's talking through a donkey. Like most of it would have been like, nah.
Well, I wish I could have been there for that one. I've been like, I heard that. That was
right. No,
that donkey's smart.
No, that's legit. And so that's a part, I think, when it comes to like, how do I lead and how do I lead well? I think some of those characteristics that play out, I think Saul had some, but then the pressure, all those things, he started choosing the opposite.
Yeah.
Where David, you see him, not perfect by anything, but King David was more of like, he humbly came before the Lord constantly. He thought about others first in leading. He go, I want to take them here.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was he put God first, and then he put people right after that of just who he was leading.
I think one of the things that, as I've been thinking about that, is just that idea, like David was anointed king over all his brothers. Like when Samuel came and anointed David, and it wasn't just like, hey, you got anointed, let's cart you off and be a leader. Like then David went through this process of
a lot of years
of playing a harp for a king that was God's chosen one, who David would have valued, fought Goliath, did kingly things before he was ever king. Yeah. And that prepared him well. I guess, you look back, like what were some of the things that helped prepare you to be a leader that maybe you didn't even think about in those times,
Yeah, I think I did. School is like, okay, try to take advantage of moments that I was given. I remember I had a professor tell me, because I got asked to speak on a Sunday night to, it was a certain service, but I was like, I don't know if I need to do that. got a lot on my plate.
Sure.
You know, all the excuses. I was a college student. I didn't have a lot on my plate. And so going to him, and he just was like, you're going to have to get over that.
Yeah.
If this is something you want to do, you need to learn and take some of these moments.
Sure.
Because I was in that season. Now, 15 years later, I'm going, I don't need to say yes to everything.
Yep.
Now I've got to learn how to say no, because there's plenty of things going on in my life that I go. So that's where I just think leadership is sometimes complicated, where it's like there's seasons where you go, absolutely, you say yes.
Yep.
If you're a young leader, I'd be like, yes, say yes.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the opportunity. Because I needed the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I needed to learn, what does it look like to speak, and what does it look like to do these things? And so I could have justified like, that's below me. I don't have time for that. All those kind of things. And I even remember like sharing in front of nursing homes where it's like half of them don't even care what I don't even know if they're there. They're sleeping. Like but you're learning.
Yeah. I remember one time sharing at the homeless shelter, and I was talking about Pete Maravich. And in the middle of my talk, I didn't bring a basketball with. And the guy's like, I want to see you dribble. I want to see you dribble right now. And like, dude got angry and left because I didn't have a basketball with me. And I'm just talking about like, I know, like, I don't.
You're Pete. Prove it.
I don't believe you can dribble.
Pete.
Yeah, you're not even Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
But I just think those moments, and it doesn't matter wherever you're leading. You just got to go. I need to take advantage of opportunities to learn. David did the same thing. He would go like, and it was years. He got anointed. And then it was years before he ever became pastor. I remember feeling in college, junior year in high school, and then it wasn't until 4 or 5 years later I was I was able to become a pastor. Yeah. But that did not mean I did not do anything during those 4 or 5 years. Those were the years I trained and learned. Yeah. And there was still so much more for me to learn after that. But if I would have just been like, well, I'm just going to wait.
Yeah, and I think that's the dangerous part. I think so many times we wait on leadership. So a lot of people wait on leadership until they get into position. Like, no, you are developing and growing long before you get to those moments, and I
think that's true, but I also think there's also danger because when I felt that calling, I assumed I had some gifting that I didn't realize I had.
Yep.
And so I went into it, and I wish I would have. I don't know if maybe I would have listened to it, would have had some more coaching then, because I went and like spoke at the youth group right after I had that. And so then it bombed, it was miserable. Yeah. So then I thought, I don't have this talent or skill set. Instead of learning, like, no, it's something you learn. It's a journey you go on. Yep. There is some gifting you have, but you don't even know what that is yet.
Yep. And and if you ever feel like you haven't figured out as a leader, like you're
not humble enough.
Yeah. That's a dangerous place to be. And I look back, like I asked you that question, like for me, watching my mom and dad serve, that was what I wanted to emulate. I'm like, if I couldn't serve, and Patrick Lencioni talks about it, he says he's got such great material, but he said, I'd love to get rid of the word servant leadership, because all leadership should be servant leadership, right?
I actually think that's one of the major characteristics of a leader is someone who serves.
Yeah. And you don't, leadership, like, look at me, look what I'm doing. No, like I want that to be a part of what I do as a leader, because you talk about as well, there are different things I have to do, things that I'm good at, things that I'm not necessarily good at, and I have to work to get to those places. And looking at those different leaders, that I think it's important to have leaders that you look at and that you emulate, or that you glean information from or wisdom from. Don Blaine was one of those guys. I think about Don Blaine, ministered in rural Idaho, very rural Idaho, and is awesome, and now lives down in Bartlesville. Just a guy that I looked at and said, that guy loves Jesus and does some things amazingly well. And I could go down a list of guys that were just so gracious to me, like Scott Gillette, who gave me the ability to lead guys when I was in college, that were in high school, and I'm still friends with a lot of those guys. Just so grateful for the ability to work out your faith, the ability to work out your leadership, and man, it just so grateful and thankful for guys that looked at me and said, hey, you should pay attention to this. Because I think, even like the three kings, you look at Saul, David, and even Absalom. David didn't lead well as a dad sometimes, and that wrecked his household in some ways as a king, where to me as a leader, I want to lead my household well, not just what I'm doing in my job as a leader at the church. So, just important things for me to be reminded of as a leader. But those are some of the thoughts that come to mind.
Well, and Bible describes King David as a man after God's own heart. And I love, there's even a passage, and Pastor David has referenced it before, lead with skillful hands and integrity of heart. And I would say unpack that a little bit more, and you'll start to find some of those leadership characteristics that you're going, I need those. Because I would say some of the main ones, and I'll start, and then I want to ask you, like some that stand out to me is like humility is a big one. If you're prideful, if you're arrogant, you're going to miss so many things. Like I look back and I was like, I'm very thankful I had the courage to go ask for help 2 years in. If I wouldn't have, who knows where I'd be. Like it just, I had to come to the reality of like, I need help. I can't solve this on my own. And there's going to be so many moments beyond that to where you're going, not just asking help from mentors, but you're going, God, I need help. Like, I don't know how to make it through this. I don't know how to lead well in this. This circumstances are really hard. And I've had plenty of those too. So you have to stay humble enough to go, I'm only a human being.
Absolutely.
And God's given me the ability to lead, but that does not give me some like, I'm some superhuman. I'm not. I'm just trying to do what God wants me to do. And so I think humility has a lot to do with where's your posture as you lead? Are you just kneeling before Christ and trying to bring other people to, hey, come kneel with me? Or are you standing up and trying to direct everybody? When you stand up and direct you've lost humility and it's become about you. And so that's been a helpful reminder. The other one is you brought up serving. And it becomes, because humility helps me remind, like, love God, let him lead it. It's not about me. Serving is also kind of like, you got to be thinking about other people above yourself. Not saying like you don't take care of yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're going to take, this is how you think, how do I get these people from A to B? That's leadership. And you're caring more about how do I do that well? How do I help them get there? And B is this next step for them, this growth for them. And so you've got to serve them in that. And so that's where I think kind of the being skillful at that, being like, okay, there's a lot of creativity, a lot of different ways to help motivate people and move people from A to B. And there's pastors who do it in totally different ways. There's leaders and business people who do it in totally different ways. And it works. And that's what I've had to come to grips, because I kind of thought it was like, relational leadership is kind of, it works, but it's not the be all end all. It's not the servant leader. It's not it's sometimes just a combination of all those. And you got to learn, like, personality wise, God's wired you in a certain way and lean into those. But having those skillful ways of going, how do I help someone move from here to here? Yeah,
man. There's just, and I think that's it. I think there's a danger sometimes where you're like, if you don't fit into this box, you can't be a leader. And I don't think
that's not true.
That's not true at all, because there are different ways that you and I lead as well. I think I can't argue with that. Humility is it. Humility is like being humble, thinking of others better than you, which is Jesus' model for us. And that moves into one that I think is like, how do I, as a leader, how do I get other people involved, and how do I bring other people along? Which I think is kind of what you're referencing a little bit.
Yeah, don't do it alone.
Yeah, don't do it alone. And there are so many people that will make your ministry better and your leadership better by them just being a part of it. And I think so many times as leaders, we fall into this category. Well, I'm the only one that can do this, and I can do it the best. And that, great, that may be true, whatever. But you're not going to bless the people that are under you or the people that are serving alongside you, giving just as much energy and effort if you don't include them and allow them to do things. And I've been guilty of not allowing people to do stuff. And that's such a dangerous place to be. I think one of the things that, thinking back through leadership, I think I took myself too seriously early on. I haven't, and I got offended easier than I ever should have been. Like, cause you come out of college and you're competitive in college and you're fired up and you're like, nobody tells you, hey, why don't you dial that competitiveness down when it comes to junior hires,
or you feel like you need to prove something to everybody.
You're like, wait a minute. You're already graciously in a position that you're not qualified for, but no, you're qualified. You know what I mean? I say that jokingly, but you by the grace of God, you were called to this, and someone believed in you enough to say, hey, we believe in you and we're excited about this. And then check your ego at the door, and I should have put that mantra up way early, check my ego at the door, and just say, God, here I am, work through me.
Yeah, you think about that. If you were still using the same skill set you learned from college, you would have been stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here now.
Both of those got to work together. Of you got to have the humility to go, my skill set's not everything, but I do have a start to a skill set.
Absolutely. And, by the grace of God, the way that my parents modeled leadership or the way they modeled their life, is different than anybody else's, but it made me who I am, and it set me on a path of saying, okay, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to hopefully be molded. And I know there are a bunch of people that shook their head and said, oh, I don't know where this guy's going, but all right.
But there are also other people who are going, man, I see it.
I see it. Yep. And I'm super grateful for that. So.
And I would recommend, along with that book, Lead Like It Matters is by Craig Rochelle. And he just talks about how do you have that kind of, you just see it. There's certain leaders who you just notice man, they just, people pay attention. And I think some of it is Holy Spirit's moving in them, all those kind of things. But they've learned how to have that humility, but also how to do it in the right way that people are actually growing with them. Because God said it, go and make disciples.
Yep.
And so to me, leadership is discipleship. It is you teaching somebody else what God has taught you.
Yep.
And so that doesn't, whether that's family, whether that's work, whether it's business, whether that's church, we're all doing that.
Yep. And there are so many other books out there that can be encouraging. We could spend another podcast talking about that, but like Maxwell stuff, and not every leadership book is meant for you. But what can you glean and what can you grow in the areas that you need to grow and be challenged in? And maybe this conversation today is just a spark for you to say, okay, is my leadership where it needs to be? Are there things that I'm not learning? Are there things that I'm closing off and not willing to admit? And we want you to grow as a leader. We need to keep growing as leaders, and it just is so essential.
And you start adding more traits. I think we'll start with humility, start with kind of that serving mentality, and I think you'll start building a skill set. Because I think within humility, it's going, hey, you're going to have to learn how to forgive others and forgive yourself. Because if you don't, you're going to create another lid for yourself that you don't want there.
Well, yeah, and you talk about that other one, the one learning to say yes and learning to say no, because you can't say yes to everything. 20 years into ministry, you've got to develop those boundaries that are essential for you to continue to maintain and sustain in leadership.
There's also leadership, and that's the last one. Is but if you're young and you're starting leadership, think humility, think serving. If you've been doing it for a while, the third one you'll add is sustainability. How do you make this last for a while? And it's not like if you're young, you're going, well, that one matters, but you're building something first. But then once you've built something, it's not a safety, hey, let's just keep it. Let's protect it. It's sustainability of how do we keep it growing? How do we keep it becoming healthier? I look at this as we get to lead churches, but I want to leave something someday for somebody else to take and lead, and it's good and it's healthy, and it's almost thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity now to lead it. Something that God let you lead, but now it's boom, somebody else gets to lead
something that we talked about in the last podcast on parenting and how to parent, but how are we setting the table? How are we setting the table for somebody else to lead at that table? And we can still be a part of that table and encourage, but our roles shift and our abilities shift. And man, I think I just was even reading the other day in my devotions, David was not the one to build the temple, but he said, I'm going to set Solomon up to build the temple. And so he prepared things, and he directly spoke into Solomon's life.
Relationships with people.
Yep. And so so vital, so key.
Yeah, and that's for me. I always try to you're right, because there's so much leadership under there, but try to narrow it down a little bit to be able to go, okay, how's my humility doing? How's my serving doing? And the skill set in that, and by serving being moving people from A to B, and then there comes this conversation okay, am I ready to let go of some of these things because it needs sustainability? It needs more people. It needs it. I'm not going to be the leader forever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm excited about that. And I love it. Maybe we'll do this again. I think there's so many things that you and I could dive into. But
yeah,
I
we
just
just spend each one of those like a little time on.
I just appreciate your wisdom, and we get to work together, and obviously
it's pretty awesome. We're lucky.
We get to benefit from each other's leadership. Hopefully, you can Chris brings something to the table.
You do. Stop it.
No, but I do. I'm grateful because I think we all win. And Craig Groeschel says that when leaders get better, everybody gets better. That's true. And it's so true. He's so wise. So wise. Anyway,
and I would just point out, like, everybody is leading in some kind of capacity.
I would agree.
We're not saying, hey, the only time you lead is when you're leading some big group. No, we're leading in homes. Yep. We're leading in relationships. We're leading in all those things. And so all these things play into that. How you lead your spouse, how you lead your family, how you lead your friendships. Also, is the same conversation of how you lead your company.
Yep. And I know you meant it, but like how you lead yourself in general.
Yes.
And you're
someone is sometimes the toughest person to lead.
It is. Oh man, I'm so critical of myself at times. And but realizing that it all goes back in the box and it ends and begins with God.
Yep.
And if we're not dependent and sustained by Him, man, we're never going to be good leaders regardless. So,
and the moment you learn to lead yourself, not saying it's easy, but there's a lot of freedom on the other side of that.
I would agree.
Where you go like, okay, now I can really start to lead others because God is teaching me so much, and it's just an overflow of what God is teaching you.
Yep. Wherever you're at in leadership,
keep growing.
Keep growing. Keep diving in, and we'll talk to you next time.
See ya.